Hi everyone, Jane from Pandemonium Art Gallery here, and today we are going to learn how to paint a moon, and we're going to work on painting trees. For this painting, I'm using a 12 by 16 inch stretched canvas, but again, any size of canvas that you have on hand or you want to use will work. The colors I'm going to be using are Phthalo Blue, Diox Purple, Titanium White, and Mars Black. The brushes I'm going to be using are a 1-inch flat brush for the background, my 1/2-inch angle brush for the tree and to fill in the moon, a smaller round natural bristle brush. This one's probably about 1/4 inch at the bottom, and a teeny tiny little liner brush. This is a size 0. One other tool I'm going to use is a cup. You can use a cup or a jar or a bowl, a cookie cutter, anything you have that's round and is about the size that you want. This is how we're going to make our moon. The first thing you want to do when planning out this painting is decide where you want the moon to be. So I've decided I want my moon to be in this upper 1/3 corner here. So right about here. And I'm going to have my tree start about in this 1/3 down here, come up this way, and back around. And that's just a general shape. My tree may end up being completely different shape, but that's the basic composition that I'm picturing. I'm gonna start with my 1-inch brush, wet it in my jar. Just wipe off the excess. And I'm gonna actually start with my darkest corner down here. And so it's gonna gradually move to lighter. But I'm gonna use all 4 of these colors, but my colors are still gonna be kind of sporadic. I'll have some lighter spots and darker spots, but basically I want it darker here at the bottom where the ground would be, and brighter right in this area, so it's like the moon is kind of casting a little bit of light outwards. So I'm gonna start with some black, not a ton of black, and I'm gonna grab a hint of my blue and a hint of white because I don't want it to be solid black. And this is going to be a very similar brush stroke to my smoky background video. If you've watched that, then you kind of understand what I'm doing here. If not, this is a good introduction to it, and then you can go watch that. I'm not worrying about blending these colors in. I'm only worrying about covering the canvas. Now I'm not going to pick up any black. I've still got a little black on my brush. I'm going to grab a little hint of purple and a little bit of white still. Remember to press your brush flat to lay color down and use the end of it to blend colors together. So if you're intimidated about painting the moon, don't be, because this moon is really fun and it's fairly simple, especially since you don't have to worry about drawing a perfect circle because the cup is going to do it for you. So I just got some black, purple, and white for this bottom corner here. Use the end of my brush to feather those 2 sections together. Press it flat to lay down more paint. Notice that my brush strokes are all kind of going the same direction. It's kind of the sweeping motion like that that's going to make everything kind of look like it's blowing upwards. A little purple, a little blue, and a little more white this time. I'm just going to get white, and it's still got blue and everything in there. But I want to make sure that this spot is nice and pale compared to everything else. Just the very end of my brush to blend those 2 sections together. could definitely do this with any colors you want. I want kind of a midnight looking painting, so that's why I'm going with the blues and the purples. But you could do gold and red if you wanted more of a fall or a harvest appearance. You could go with greens, like a phthalo green would be really pretty with this. You could do red. You really can do anything. I'm actually going to brighten up this spot just a little bit more. I feel like it got a little darker than I wanted it. I'm mostly just using the end of my brush here to feather that white in, because I don't want to lay down too much white and make this whole section light. Now I'm going to let it dry, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how to paint the moon. Now I'm going to use this cup to place my moon right about there in the middle of that lighter area. To do this, I'm first going to wet my angle brush in the jar and just wipe off a little of the excess. Next, I'm going to mix up kind of a medium gray color. So I'm going to grab just a little bit of black, not a lot, just a little bit, and bring it over into my white. And just mix it until I have a gray that I'm pretty happy with. Once I've got that gray, I'm just going to wipe it around the edge of the cup. It doesn't have to be real even. It doesn't have to even necessarily cover the entire cup. Just enough so that I can get a circle. So I'm going to take the cup, put it onto the canvas very gently so that it doesn't smear. Make sure it's all the way on there, and I'm going to just barely turn it maybe 1/8 of an inch one way or the other. Just so it smears that paint enough so I've got a circle. Now I'm going to mix up more of that gray. I grabbed a little bit more black because I want quite a bit of that gray now. Alright, and now since I've got my circle drawn for me, I can use my angle brush, and remember, you always want the tip of the brush to drag. So even though I'm going to be using it flat here to go around the edge, notice that tip is still dragging. Meaning I'm not painting up into that tip. If you happen to have a little bit of a bumpy outer edge of your moon, that's okay, because right, the moon is kind of cratered. So as long as the general shape is round, the outer edge doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. Again, I didn't worry about blending in those colors, making sure it was a solid, consistent gray. I'm just making sure that all of the background is covered. And now I'm going to let that dry again. You want that to be dry for the next part. So if you have to use a blow dryer or something, go ahead and do that. But you don't want this moon to be even slightly damp for the next part. Okay, so my moon is dry, and we are actually going to use one other tool that I didn't tell you about, and that is a small water spray bottle. So I'm going to just lightly, just 2 or 3 quick mists, and I'm just going to swipe over it, make sure that it's fairly evenly damp. I don't really care if the water got outside of it, that doesn't matter to me. I just want to make sure that the moon is a little damp, but there's not water running down it. So now I've got my angle brush again. I'm going to load up with a good amount of white. I want this white to be kind of thick, and I want to apply it really quickly. So just like I applied the gray, I'm going to start on the outer edge, just run along the edge there. And fill it in. And that's why I'm using quite a bit of white. Spraying the water on it resists some of it, but that's also going to help us in the next part. About those drips, and you could even leave those drips if you wanted, if you get drips like that. like drips. We've got our white pretty good on there. It's not really even, but that's okay because we're gonna mess it up anyway. Just make sure that bottom edge is covered. Let's take care of those drips. Here's how we take care of a drip. We take a paper towel and we blot it. We don't wipe it, we blot it. And the reason we don't wipe it is because it can smear paint, but it can also remove paint. It might remove some of my background color if I were to wipe that. And then with my cleaned off brush, dried off on my paper towel, I'm just gonna clean up that edge. Now I'm gonna take my natural brush, I'm gonna wet it, so I'm gonna squeeze it off on the paper towel so it's almost completely dry. And then I'm really gonna mess it up on the paper towel so the bristles are really flared out. Keep your paper towel handy, you're gonna want it for this part. So we're gonna start by just kind of dabbing here and there. Each dab overlaps the previous one. Wipe it off on your paper towel every now and then. Now it's gonna go outside of your moon a little bit. And when that happens, grab your angle brush that is damp but has been wiped off on a paper towel and just wipe those little spots back in. Make sure to wipe it off on your paper towel before you go back for more. I'm gonna keep blotting at this. And I want this part to be fairly dark, so I'm even gonna scrape at it a little. Just until that color starts to show. Just pick a couple of places. Don't worry if it doesn't look just like the moon. You can even use your finger a little bit to get some of these softer spots going. I'm into full contact painting, so I'm okay getting paint on my hands. It freaks some people out. Actually, I think I'm liking doing it this way better. You can always change how you're doing something. I do paint my moon like that a lot, how I was showing you with that natural bristle brush, but sometimes it feels like it's not working, and just because you've done something a certain way in the past doesn't mean that that's how you have to do it always. Something may be a little bit different, whether it's, maybe you're using a different kind of canvas or paint, or you applied the paint thicker or thinner this time than last time, or maybe it's just not working for you for some reason. Change how you're doing it. Don't feel stuck doing it a certain way just because that's how you've done it before. Now I'm not wiping, I'm not smearing, I'm just tapping my finger onto it and letting it pull off little bits of the paint. And in a couple of places, I'll go down to as dark as it will let me get. And it may not. As it starts to dry, less and less paint is gonna come off. But that's okay. I'm just gonna go until I'm happy with the way it looks. Or until I stop getting paint. And then we're gonna change it up again. Make sure you hit the edge here and there, because your moon wouldn't have a perfectly white edge all the way around. It might have some dark spots here and there on it. So I'm just gonna break up some of these really white parts, not all of them. That's about all the white paint I'm getting off of there. So I've got my natural brush again, I've cleaned it and drying it off on my paper towel until it's as absolutely dry as I can get it. I'm gonna splay out the bristles a little bit again. And I'm gonna go back to this gray that I made up in the first place. I'm just tapping up a little bit of it. And this is pretty much dry. There's just this one little spot that's not dry. So now I'm gonna go into here, into these spots that I wanted to make a little darker, and I'm just kind of tapping around in there. If I feel like I'm getting too polka dotty, I can do the same thing, just tap it with my finger. The cool thing about this is, as I work it, if I feel like I get too crazy with the gray, I can go back in with some white afterwards and tap over top of it again, lightly. I've got such the tiniest amount of paint on my brush, but it's enough that as I tap around, it deposits enough that I get a hint of a shadow, not an actual dark spot, just a hint of a shadow. See right in here where it's really, really white, just barely, the tiniest amount of paint on there, but it is definitely changing it. Get a tiny bit more. Now I'm not scrubbing, I'm not wiping, I'm just dotting like that. Just break up some of these really bright areas. Not all of them. I mean, you know, the moon still has some areas that are pretty bright on it. And now I'm going to get just a tiny hint of white. Can you see? I mean, there's almost no paint on there. And I'm just going to brighten up a couple spots. Not everywhere. Just make sure I've still got some bright spots in here. Too much. If you get too much, just wipe it off. Just make sure that you still have some areas that are definitely dark and some areas that are definitely white. You don't want to just dot dark all over evenly and then dot white all over evenly. You know, the moon has little areas that are a lot darker or a lot lighter than other areas, and they're not perfectly round shaped either, so you know, make sure that they're sporadically shaped. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to start drawing our tree. So to paint the trees, I'm only going to use two different types of brushes. I'm going to use my 1/2" angle brush, and I'm going to use the little liner brush for the detail branches. So I've had a little bit of an issue here. Twice now, my camera has turned off while I've been recording. My battery is full, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. It never happened before, but it's happened twice in a row now. So as you can see, I have part of my painting that is complete that you didn't get to see. And a lot of the buildings on my street are supposedly haunted. I've never experienced any of that here, but my camera did just shut off twice in a row. So I'm gonna go back over really quick, and kind of tell you what I did here to start my tree off, and then we'll hope that my camera doesn't turn off again and we can finish uninterrupted. So to start my tree here, I took my angle brush, cleaned off with a little bit of water in it, and I mixed that water in with a little bit of black paint. You just want enough so that the paint almost flows, but not so much that it's running all over the place. If it's too runny, your paint's going to be clear. It's not going to cover very well. If it doesn't have enough water in it, then the paint's not going to go very far. I decided where my tree was going to start and my basic composition, and then with the point of the angle brush pointing downward, I just quickly drew a line. And then I have to make a tree off of that line I drew. So basically what I'm getting at here is I don't micromanage where my tree is gonna go. I just make a line, and whatever that line looks like is what my tree is gonna be. Once I drew my line, then I used a little extra pressure to start widening it, and that's where I was when my camera shut off the last time. So you can put your hand on the canvas a little bit too if that helps you get some extra control. And see, as I go up, my pressure is lightening, and that's helping me go from a wide trunk to these narrow branches. See how I finished just using the last couple bristles on the brush. For a little bit more in-depth information on how to use this brush properly, you can also watch my basic brush handling technique video. So I'm just going to go through and add a few more branches. I'm not worried about these branches being as long as I want them to be right now, because this really isn't the best brush to do that with. So I'm just getting my basic branches on here, widening everything the way I want it, and then I'll go through with my smaller brush, add detail branches, and kind of shape everything up properly. Go ahead and let branches cross over in front of your moon. That is really interesting to the eye, and it keeps you looking from one thing to the next. Don't be afraid to cover that moon a little bit. See, I made all these little branches, and now I'm just widening them, making sure that the shape is what I want, and then I'll get my smaller brush. All right, so I've got this little tiny brush, and I wet it in the jar, and I'm gonna get me some black paint. Move you in there a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing here with this teeny little brush. And I'm gonna put my hand right on my canvas. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm just using the very, very tip of this brush. And if you're not comfortable making lines this small, then just use a little bit of a bigger brush. But see, even here, if I push harder, I get a wider line. It starts to fuzz out like that. You just need a little more water and a little bit more paint. Let your branches have these nice, natural little wiggles. If it helps you to get those little wiggles by kind of turning the brush lightly as you go, then go ahead and do that. There's no rule to how many branches you have to add. You can add as many or as few as you want. As far as whether to start drawing your branch, from the tip or from the tree, that's up to you. I'll do it both ways depending on what kind of a tree I'm painting, sometimes the direction that I'm painting, just whatever feels the most natural to me at that moment. Now, if you want these nice flowy branches like what I have, my best advice is to start your branches into the tree. Don't start it right off. So let me show you what I mean. If I want a branch that comes out right here, I'm not gonna just go straight off of it. See how I've got a little bit more of an angle right there? So instead, if I want it to come out right there, I'm gonna start down here and I'm gonna come up the branch and out where I want it. So let me show you that again. Let's do one right here. So if I want one that comes out right here, I'm gonna start down here and I'm gonna come up and then swoop up out of it, rather than starting right where I want it to come out. And it's the same one with these little teeny ones that I'm getting off of there. So I'm going to start here and swoop up out of it. If your branches are too much of one thing and you want them to be another thing, you can still change that. So let me show you what I mean by that. I think some of these branches are way straighter than I want them to be. Not all of them. I like a little bit of variety in here, but let's say right here, this little section from here to here is very straight and I don't really want that. So I'm gonna come back over it, and rather than widening the entire line, I'm gonna fatten that part out a little bit right there. And then maybe put a little elbow in it there. And now, it's not a perfectly straight branch anymore. It's got a little bit more character to it. Likewise, if you've got something that's got too much of an angle in it, let's say right here, you can just go and smooth that out. Get a little bump you don't like, just make a branch coming off of it. So that's what I mean when I say trees really are fairly simple. It's the brush techniques that you need to work on to be able to make the trees that you want. But notice I'm always keeping my hand right on the canvas. And that is to make sure that I have a very steady hand so I get exactly the branch that I'm looking for. Now, I do practice this a lot. So if you try and do these tiny branches that are like one hair wide and you have a hard time with it, don't beat yourself up. Just keep practicing. Branch gets away from you and just make it a little bit wider. For the most part, you want to make sure, and all rules are made to be broken, so when I tell you things like this, know that it's not a set in stone rule. But for the most part, you want to make sure that when a branch comes off of another branch, that it's smaller than that one. So for example, right here, I wouldn't make a branch coming off of it that's this wide. I would make it about half of the width. If you want, you can go ahead and add some highlights. I think I'm going to do just a few right in this area of the trunk. And if you end up not liking it, then you can just paint over it with black. So I'm just mixing a little bit of white in there. Just kind of smooth down over top of it, even though this black is dry. Worried that these white highlights look really chunky and messy. Get a little water on my brush, a little more black paint, and I can scoot down over top of them a little bit and smooth them out so they're not quite so strong, or just paint over them all together if I don't like them. But I'm using my black paint here pretty thin, so that it's smearing that lighter color in. You do have to work kind of quick here, because once the lighter color dries, all you're going to be doing is painting over it and completely covering it, which, you know, is fine. You can add it back in. That's the cool thing about painting in black and white, is you can always add it back in or cover it up if you don't like it. So I'm gonna add just a tiny hint more white while that black is still wet. Just kind of dashing over it in a few spots. I'm gonna work in pretty small sections. A little bit of water, more black, pretty thin. And notice I did not clean off my brush. I didn't clean the white off before I got the black. So it's gonna help me mix up a little bit of a darker gray color. Only highlighting it on the side that's facing the moon. So I'm not going to highlight it on parts of the branches that are facing away from the moon. So there is our tree and moon. Now you could go from here and you could keep working on the tree if you want. You could really make these branches go out and take up most of the canvas. You could add tons and tons of highlights. You could add stars, you could do anything you want from here. So thanks for watching. I hope you had a good time painting trees and moons with me, and I hope to see you next time.